Hi, it's me, Kelly here, and in today's video I want to talk about motivation. Now there's two types of motivation, intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. You can almost think of them as head and heart motivations or logical and illogical motivations. Extrinsic or head or logical motivation is learning a language for reasons such as furthering your career, or to add another skill to your resume, or to look impressive in front of your friends, because who doesn't want that? So they're all rational reasons, they make sense, they're obvious to people from the outside, and quite often they're measurable. Intrinsic motivation comes from within, it comes from your heart, and I always think of it like falling in love. It's not necessarily logical or rational, and it's driven by emotion and not reason. It's having a deep passion for the language and a desire to learn the language for the language itself or for the culture and the people attached to that language. And it's driven much more by emotion rather than reason. I think intrinsic motivation is real motivation because it comes from such a personal place. Yes, it's nice to have all the extrinsic benefits of being able to speak another language, and I'm not saying that extrinsic motivation is bad at all, but from my own experience, the intrinsic motivation is what's going to carry you further. It's what's going to carry you through and keep you going when things get really difficult, because it's driven much more by emotion and passion rather than reason. And from my own experience, emotion and passion are a much more powerful motivator than reason. So if you're struggling to learn a language, be honest with yourself about what your motivations are. I struggled to learn French for 10 years at school and then for a further 2 years as an adult. And at the same time learning French as an adult, I was also learning Afrikaans. And the Afrikaans was really taking off and I was doing really, really well. And the French I was really struggling with. So I knew that it wasn't me because the Afrikaans was going well. I knew I could learn a language. So I looked at why I was struggling with the French and I realized that it was my motivation. It was all extrinsic. It made sense for me to learn French because of living in the UK and how close we are to France. There's also a lot of French people in my town, so it makes sense for me to speak French. From a business point of view, it makes sense for me to speak French as well. Now Afrikaans, my reasons for learning Afrikaans, some of them are logical in the fact that I'm married to a South African, although his native language is English and we speak English most of the time, but I travel to South Africa quite regularly, so it makes sense, but not as much sense as the French. You know, living here in the UK, there's no reason for me to learn Afrikaans, but I just feel such a pull for the language. I love it, I love the sound of it, I love the people attached to it. And so it's much more of an intrinsic motivation with the Afrikaans, and that's what's allowed me to get as far with it as I have, where with the French it was all extrinsic motivations. And just to show you how powerful intrinsic motivation is, 3 weeks ago I switched from studying French to studying Spanish. Now Spanish, I've always had a love for Spanish dance and for Spanish music. I really enjoy Latino music. I'm interested in Latin America. My fondest memories of childhood are our holidays to Spain. So I feel a really strong pull towards the language that I don't feel towards, or didn't feel towards, the French. And also a good friend of mine is from Mexico and her native language is Spanish. And although she speaks fluent English, I would love to be able to communicate with her in her native language as well. So also with the Spanish, there's been a bit of an intrinsic and an extrinsic motivation, because with the Spanish, it would make far more sense for me to learn Castilian Spanish because of living in the UK and Europe being so close. But I have, because of my friend, and just because I'm more interested in Latin America than I am in Spain, I've got much more of a pull to learn Latin American Spanish. So I've been concentrating on the Spanish from Mexico because of my friend, and I can hear a difference in the sounds in the language, and I have a much more of an emotional attachment and an emotional pull towards Spanish from Mexico. And yes, going back to showing you how powerful intrinsic motivation is, I've been learning Spanish for just 3 weeks, and already after 3 weeks I can say the same amount in Spanish as I can in French after 12 years. So I think that just shows how important and how powerful intrinsic motivation is. So yeah, if you're struggling to learn a language, then just go back and be honest with yourself and think about what your motivation is. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with extrinsic motivations at all, but the intrinsic motivation, I feel, is what really carries you through with it. So let me know if you've had a similar experience with motivation, and also what languages you're learning and your reasons for learning them as well. So comment down below, and that's everything for now, and I'll speak to you soon. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.